I would like to call to order the January 7, 2020 Little Rock City Board of Directors meeting. We would like to welcome those that are in attendance as well as those watching at home and streaming online. I trust everyone's had an exceptional and holiday season. Madam Clerk, would you please read the roll?
Director Hendricks, Director Richardson, Director Webb, Director Peck, Director Hines, Director Wright, Director Compuris, Director Fortson, Director Adcock, Vice Mayor Wyrick, Mayor Scott.
Present. Now, I'm going to carry on. Would you like to, Director Hendricks, would you like to do an invocation, or would you like to? Hold on one second. Hey, Wendell, if you, we got you, Director Hendricks. You got it.
With this being the first Tuesday in the year, I will pass the piece to our mayor
Yes,
for the
ma'am.
invocation.
Yes, ma'am. May we all bow our heads. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for your many blessings. Thank you for the year 2019 and allowing us to cross over to 2020. As we embark on this new year, we ask that you continue to lead, guide, and direct our paths, that you help us to unite our city, help us to secure our neighborhoods, and focus on jobs growth. We ask that you also always keep a peace of mind in each of our hearts, that we do what's best for the city of Little Rock. I pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Others pray in their name, their Heavenly Father's name as well. Amen. May we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now we're going to take this time to recognize Dr. Riley Lipschitz and Mr. Chris East, who will make a presentation regarding the recommendations for the R3 Little Rock Park Task Force that has begun meeting over the past 6 months regarding the vision for repurposing War Memorial and Hyman Parks. Thank you so much, Dr. Lipschitz and Mr. East.
Thanks. Thank you for having us. We are thrilled to be here. Let me make sure. So we have a short presentation for you that's a summary of the work that we've done over the last several months through the R3LR Task Force. We were tasked with re-envisioning what War Memorial and Hyman Park could look like after the closure of the golf course. And so the following presentation shows some of the work that we came up with and our recommendations. So parks and open space play a huge role in the quality of life of any community. War Memorial and Hyman Park specifically offer an incredible opportunity for citizens of Little Rock to participate in active recreation and passive recreation and enjoying nature. The following presentation for the R3 Little Rock Task Force, we chose to focus on concepts and vision. So this is not, a good caveat for us is these are not details of what should happen, of what will happen. We rather chose to think about what could happen and what would really create the sort of quality of life that we would like to see as citizens of Little Rock. So our task force, we had 3 subcommittees that looked at development, communication, and planning and research. Development looked, which was led by Chris East, worked to identify public and private funding sources and generally about funding concepts for these initiatives. Communications worked to think about the communication strategy for the general public, how we might engage the citizens and community members at large. And then planning and research looked at comparable parks throughout the country, as well as prior plans, of which there were a lot, of what War Memorial might look like. When we thought about the recommendations for this task force, we wanted to focus on 4 big goals. So whatever happens with War Memorial and Hyman, any work should think about these big ideas. One is connecting and unifying citizens. Public parks should allow residents the opportunity to engage and connect in meaningful ways, regardless of income, ethnicity, or where you live. Secondly, we would hope that everything would celebrate nature. Hyman and War Memorial offer outlets to celebrate the natural beauty of our city, and any reinvestment should think about protecting the natural and biodiversity of those areas. We wanted to encourage play. whether it's healthy places for active play or passive play, play with children, play with adults, play with pets. That's a big part of any quality of life. And then lastly, and this is important for me as a physician, is public parks have the opportunity to improve the health and health equity of our city. So we're going to think about specifically the recommendations for War Memorial, and then Chris will take over the next piece. So when I think about War Memorial Park, one of the opportunities that we felt was that we could take advantage of what other stakeholders in that area were doing. So we recommend the development of the War Memorial District, which would extend from Pine and Cedar over to Markham and to University, and then Markham to 12th Street. This district is a concept. I don't understand the legal ramifications if that's something you would want to do, but it was more about how could you connect War Memorial Park to the surrounding areas and what other stakeholders were doing. When we think about that War Memorial Park district, we can think about, first and foremost, what would you do with that War Memorial area, which we would have, sorry. So it would have increased passive and active play space. We're talking about hiking trails, biking trails, walking, revitalizing Coleman Creek to maybe potentially increase waterway access and water activities. We encouraged the group to think about leveraging the current, what do we call it, the golf course? What's that word? Where the clubhouse. We wanted to use the clubhouse as a restaurant space and to think about entertainment and opportunities to engage people to bring citizens around the city into War Memorial Park. We also wanted to think about, and this is important, what was happening with the Little Rock Zoo. Whatever happens to the zoo, of course, is a huge impact in the War Memorial area and that district. So supporting the growth and expansion of the zoo and making it a world-class destination for our city, I think, has the potential to make the War Memorial area an unparalleled gem for us. We wanted to think about leveraging what was happening with the Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau for increasing our activity and sports complexes. I think that's a careful balance between public active sports and passive sports, but we know that there's a lot of work going on in that area. And then lastly, there's a lot of work going on with UAMS and what they're hoping to do to expand their footprint in that area, of which some of the highlights we could think about are potentially putting together a state-of-the-art, world-class children's development center that would collaborate with the Children's Library, potentially the zoo, allow for not only UAMS employees to participate in that, but also community members. I understand that UAMS is trying to increase the transit that's happening for their employees, and that 12th Street Corridor has been identified as a potential rapid transit bus area. So that we're really talking about how are we increasing access for community members across the city to get into that area. And then lastly, as we think about what UAMS is doing to invest in the 12th Street Corridor, I think the city has a wonderful opportunity to work together to leverage an entire health and wellness community that could change the face of what health looks like for us. I will say, just as a brief caveat, I am a physician at UAMS, but do not represent what they're doing and do not speak on their behalf. I just think that leveraging the current enthusiasm for improving that area and expanding the greenway access through there is a great opportunity. Here is some general vision of what War Memorial could look like. Again, this is purely conceptual, but it includes thinking about how we would leverage large and small baseball fields, lots of green space, bike areas, increasing the pond area, and potentially changing some of the driveway access to improve transit through the Zoo Drive and also Jonesboro Drive, which would connect to 12th Street with the Little Rock Children's Library.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Riley. I'm not sure I'll do quite as good a job introducing everything as you did, but I'll pick up with Heinemann to also reinforce what what Riley said, I focused on the funding part of it. So for those people that worked on Heinemann, I apologize if I fall short of your vision. But that having been said, as you can see, Heinemann Park District, one of the main things we really tried focusing on is being consistent with the connectivity of the parks throughout the entire city, and really finding ways to preserve the natural beauty of the space, because that really tends to be, I think, one of the greatest assets that park continues to have. We're looking for additional partners that I think can help improve those areas, and that includes the Arkansas Game and Fish Nature Center, other state agencies, as well as other state city departments. Some of the open spaces and the potential future uses for that park would be small amphitheater, open pavilions, multi-purpose lawns, and so forth that you can see up on the screen there. What we've done then is also continued to develop a vision plan, and this vision plan is consistent with what we heard from the public in terms of looking for areas for disc golf, areas for those open pavilions, and you can see the disc golf course being expanded, also preserving areas in the natural floodway for fishing, for wildlife management, for also walking trails and ATV trails. So really what we've recommended at Heinemann is to find a way to preserve and enhance what's there without really creating all new program elements like a new series of golf courses. One of the things that we really came to identify throughout this process is the need for a Greenway Trail connection. And what we mean by that is, again, that's sort of what we have here next, is a reinforcement of the importance of tying our community together by creating connections between each of these park systems. So you can see here right in the center of the space you have the War Memorial Park, and then as the line goes to the left of the page and then further south, we begin connecting to other parks, Canis, Boyle, and then, of course, down to Heinemann itself. But we found that the participation in the community was very important from each different neighborhood, but we wanted to find ways to also break down those sort of divisions between the neighborhoods and, of course, tie them all together through our park system. Next, we really focused on funding, and what that basically boils down to is we'll need multiple different funding sources to accomplish our multiple different goals. And what that boils down to is for our major goals like infrastructure improvements, expanding the lake or other larger road and bridge type of improvements, we're going to likely need to have public funding for that. For program space, for active program space, we can look at using public-private partnerships. So if we're able to have a restaurant or a clubhouse on one of these sites, we'll be able to use that, basically money generated from those partnerships to improve and create those types of spaces. And then any revenue generated by the programming of restaurants, rentals, those things would be used for maintenance and upkeep of the park. And then finally, for any real specific improvements like playground equipment, sculptures, those sort of things, memorials, those would all be donor specific or grant specific. So we really tried to basically funnel down those items that big public, use public money, and then as we go down to the more singular private, then we'll use more singular private grant funding. So what we've learned through all this is that, of course, there's a lot to it. We believe that the new strategies or new funding streams are really going to be required to get a collaborative view of the entire community, not just of the two War Memorial and Heinemann Park areas. Also, to reinforce what Riley said is we didn't have anything set in stone. We really wanted to make sure that you all heard what our important values are and characteristics, and hopefully we'll be able to take that from there to future development. Thank you.
I just want to say one last thing. I think there's a couple gaps in what we were able to do, and it's important to point those out for everybody. One is that we didn't get nearly enough community support and engagement that would be required to do this sort of work. So that's something that will have to be emphasized moving forward to make sure that this is getting the sort of public feedback and contribution that it needs. As it goes, we did not think about War Memorial Stadium and what would happen to that and what will happen from the parks and tourism. And lastly, we understand that there are land easements on the parks currently for War Memorial Games, and that has limitations that are going to need to be addressed. And I think as we move forward, this is just the very beginning, scratching the surface of what this could be. And we hope that the city and the board and parks can take that on and really build an amazing park system and gem for Little Rock. Thank you.
Or Dr. Lipschitz and Mr. East, just want to first just take this time not only to recognize you. I know you were 2 of 4, I believe 4 co-chairs on the R3 Little Rock Parks Task Force, but I know you have many members of that task force that are in attendance, I believe. If you all would please stand. Want to take time to recognize the entire task force because you all have been meeting for the last 6 months and spending a lot of your volunteer time on a decision that will definitely change our city for the next 25 to 50 years. And we just want to say thank you for that time. Thank you for these recommendations and providing this feedback as we move forward. So thank you so much. I just want to give you a round of applause. Director Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you guys for a wonderful presentation. I do have a couple of comments that may be a segue or segues to some questions I may have you guys with respect to the War Memorial District. Back in 2008, we started a 12th Street Corridor Revitalization project, August of 2008. We had UMS involved in terms of being one of the funders of our consultants, as well as former Vice Chancellor Tom Butler being on the steering committee. So they did have plans on helping get involved in that area, and I think that resulted in a medical clinic on 12th Street. And also with Bobby Roberts, former director of CALS, being on the steering committee as well, I think they made a conscious effort to put the Children's Library south of 630, what I think is a wonderful, wonderful accomplishment for those of us south of 630. And your last part about community engagement is really, really important. Because one of the things that stuck out with 12th Street, I think one of the reasons why we won the Urban Design Award from Arkansas Planning Association in 2010 was because this was something that was done with the community rather than for the community or at the community. So the community engagement part is critically important to what we're trying to do. My question is that it seems like your boundaries overlap with the exception of 630, the 12th Street corridor boundaries, and right now we're in the process of kind of rebranding that area. And it seems like you guys have already branded that area. And one of the things, when I say Hillcrest or the Heights, you know what I'm talking about. So in that revitalization project, it's critically important that we have to rebrand that area. And when I heard you say War Memorial District, I'm thinking you're making references to those boundaries that you just showed us. Is that correct?
Yes, I think so. I mean, our goal was that public parks are embedded in communities, and there are neighborhoods right up against War Memorial. And if we expand, it needs to expand beyond 630. It can't limit in those boundaries.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think my only concern is that may run in conflict with our next. I think we have an RFQ out now, Bruce, for rebranding of the 12th Street corridor area, and we've had significant amount of public sector involvement, about $30 million, including the library, to attract private sector involvement. I know Tom and UMS were really, really interested in helping us improve the housing stock for employees to kind of alleviate the need for parking space. So my concern is this may run in stark contrast with what we're trying to do in terms of rebranding that area, since some of those boundaries overlap.
Yeah. And I think that kind of speaks to some of our limitations from a task force, is what we are privy to and what else is happening in the city at large. I think our goal would still stand, which is how can you expand the boundaries of War Memorial to incorporate what's happening in the 12th Street corridor and in UAMS and at St. Vincent, so that everybody has buy-in to improving that area and everybody feels some ownership. So I would ask you to not feel too limited by us saying we need a district. It was more a vision that I think speaks to what you would want as well.
No, I'm not. I don't think that's what you're saying. I'm just talking about the whole approach with respect to community engagement and community involvement, because we anticipate a lot of that when we have this RFQ out for the consultants to help us rebrand the area. And once again, community engagement is a part of that. And I know when work with the community, sometimes when you present what you presented here, there's an assumption that the decision's already been made. So I think we need to figure out a way, Bruce, Mayor, figure out a way, once this RFQ is met or fulfilled, figure out a way to dovetail what they're doing with our 12th Street work so they're not running in conflict with each other.
Yes, sir. I totally agree.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Well, thank you all so much. We don't have any more questions from our board members, so thank you so much. I also understand that a part of this presentation, Mr. Jesse Gibson would like to share something with us. Jesse Gibson is part of the Parks Commission, chairman of the Parks Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, board members. I presently serve as the chair of the Little Rock Parks and Recreation Commission. Our commission's tasked, as you know, by statute, or ordinance rather, with reviewing, consulting, and advising on issues involving Little Rock Parks. We're often the public sounding board with public meetings about what the public likes, and more specifically what they don't like about Little Rock Parks. And our commission has been discussing a lot of these issues involving Heineman and War Memorial and many other parks for quite some time. And so when this task force was formulated, I had a little bit of trepidation about how are we going to come up with any kind of plan. The commission's going to be dealing with some of these issues, of course. The task force, certainly the zoo, has a vested interest in this area. And so I had a little bit of trepidation, but I've been extremely encouraged that without any real coordination between these three groups, we've reached some consensus about what we think and what we hope these two parks can become. Our commission's met several times over the last few months, and I don't want to bog you down with a complete presentation, although I do have a letter that I drafted to the task force and wanted to hand deliver a copy to each of you board members. If I could do that now, Mr. Mayor, would that be allowed?
Yes.
Let me walk you through a few things that our commission, with some public input over the course of several months, has come to unanimous agreement on what we would like to see in both Heineman and War Memorial. First off would be, and it was mentioned, and I don't want my remarks to be too much of here, but there's going to be a lot of here because there's consensus on a lot of these views. Inclusion of some approved commercial activities within War Memorial or Heineman Parks. Dr. Lipschitz talked a little bit about this. We had extensive discussion on this. And if our vision is to look into the future 20, 30, 40 years, what those generations are going to desire, we feel, is some kind of commercial activity that they can do. Maybe it's food, maybe it's beverage, maybe it's something like that. Of course, our commission is not supportive of the sale of parkland, but at least examining some partnerships with some commercial ventures within both of those parks. I think that's a very important thing to draw people in, to give them other things to do. Of course, nature and outdoor activities are very crucial, but giving them something they can do in addition to that we think would be very important. Number two, exactly what the previous presenter said. We had unanimous support in our commission for competitive level softball, baseball, and soccer fields. Again, the possibilities for commercial activity and building commercial activity within that district is quite evident. Those sporting activities bring boys and girls from all over the state and even the region to come to our city and to do business here and to eat in our restaurants and stay in our hotels. The commercial activity we hope could spill into restaurant, food and beverage, also on the parkland. The third thing that we hear a lot about in our commission we hear a lot about which sports are the new and emerging sports in Little Rock and in our communities. And one of the ones we continuously hear about is championship level disc golf. We hear that these tournaments can sometimes draw people from across the nation to come to our city, experience Little Rock, if they have a championship level, and I want to stress that championship level, disc golf course. There are some very famous, if you are a golfer, you might know of course designers, but there are disc golf designers who do this professionally. There's already disc golf at Heinemann. It's already become a destination, a known destination for disc golf. There are some temporary facilities there. What we would really hope to do, if similar to what the Adventure Park envisioned for Heinemann, is to have championship level disc golf at Heinemann in addition to those things that the previous presenters spoke about. Fourth, connectivity. It's extremely important. Something that we want to make sure that all of these, and Director Richardson made an excellent point, to make these accessible to from all avenues, from all parts of the city, to become a true central gathering place, to access it from 630, from the south, from the east, and the west, so everyone can access War Memorial Park, to bring everyone in to enjoy that space. Connectivity with trails, additional bicycle trails, hiking trails. It has some thoughts. There's someone smarter than me about how to access over busy intersections and roads. Especially with several large employers. Dr. Lipschitz mentioned UAMS. There are several large commerce centers and business centers around that area. We believe with commercial ventures and commercial opportunities for food and beverage that we could draw in for even not only from the communities but also from the businesses located around War Memorial, to bolster attendance, to bring a better feeling about the usage of the park. Fifth, and this is something that really came about without any kind of discussion, but our commission is, number 5, in full support of the plans that the Little Rock Zoo is going to talk to you about, I think, here tonight. There is a section of War Memorial, and make sure my directions are right. It's the east side, the west side, the southwest side of the stadium. That strip of 3 holes there, where it seems tailor-made for expansion of the zoo. They have some wonderful ideas, I've come to learn, of the zoo expansion. We believe there's a great market for people inside of Little Rock, but also outside of Little Rock, to make a world-class regional zoo. We're fully supportive. We think that whatever the zoo can do that would be in the spirit of what our park's vision is, we're fully supportive of that expansion. 6, going along, again, we didn't even know we were going to reach this point, but professional installed mountain bike trails in Heinemann. Again, part and parcel, hand in hand with the Adventure Park design or vision of the task force for Heinemann. Again, there's that activity going on right now at that park, but we think it could be enhanced. There's a lot more that we could talk about, but those are the things that we wanted to present to the Board of Directors that we had unanimous support of. We could bog you down in the minutia as much as we wanted to. But those are the things in viewing these proposals. I think what we see is a consensus. Although what Director Richardson, you said earlier, that the consensus has got to come from within the citizenry. And I think that's not going to be any more important until the last step, which is often the hardest step, which would be a funding mechanism. We understand that a dedicated funding mechanism, we believe a dedicated funding mechanism for parks and public funding is crucial. And I think what you've seen in other cities is that once that dedicated funding mechanism is in place, private funding becomes much more available and easy to get. Again, and if that dedicated funding is found, there will be some budgetary money from parks that would probably be able to be repurposed for other things. We think that's a very important and crucial part. And I think that the public, I think the citizens in Little Rock, when they see this idea, when they see what War Memorial can become, when they see what Heinemann can become, I think they will support this wholeheartedly. In fact, I think they won't suffer these ideas. I think they'll demand these ideas. I think that the public will want them. It'll be a desirable thing. It will enhance their city. It will enhance their opportunities for leisure and recreation. And I think it will be something that will be a net positive for everyone. And with that, I don't want to be too redundant from the comments earlier, so if I had any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gibson. Are there any questions from the board? Seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time.
We do appreciate you. We will now take some time to transition from the R3 Little Rock Parks Task Force to now discuss the Little Rock Zoo Task Force. And we will now ask that Mr. Chad Causey please approach.
Mr. Mayor, board members, thank you all for having me again. I'm Chad Causey. I'm a member of the Zoo Foundation Board and has been serving on the Zoo Task Force as well and looking at the zoo of the future. I'm going to try to move through these slides. There's a lot of them, but we'll get to the major points. And if you have questions at any point, at any time, please don't hesitate to interrupt me. The Zoo Task Force came to be in terms of determining what the long-term sustainability for the zoo here in Little Rock is. It's a major asset for the community. We all know that, and I think we all know that the full potential of the zoo has yet to be realized. Our task force put together a great team to work on this. We brought in a group called Relevant Strategies and Solutions, which was paid for through foundation funding, private funding, to help shepherd us through this process and determine the best growth potential and sustainability for the zoo itself. Let me take a step back and look at what the current situation of our zoo is today. It's a wonderful asset. I take my children there quite regularly. We're members of the zoo and enjoy going to do it, but I think we all know that it could be more, and there are some reasons why that has yet to happen. We have a wonderful master plan that was put in place in 2014 that provides for a build-out of the zoo and its assets that would attract more people, attract more revenue, be more of an economic engine and a magnet for folks traveling outside of Little Rock to come and take part in this great asset that we have. The problem is there's been minimal investment above an annual appropriation and what gates sales, that revenues and concessions that we get. It's stayed pretty much static over the last several years. We've had no new major exhibits that have taken place or been put in place, which is the model that zoos thrive with. You need new exhibits and new attractions to bring folks continually back to the zoo. We have not had that because of those funding challenges. Without major exhibits being unveiled, you see attendance drops. That exacerbates the problems with gate and revenues in that case. And again, when you don't have the money to maintain the proper operations and maintenance on an annual basis, you start seeing deferred maintenance build up as well. Here's a quick look at zoo attendance over the last 5 years. At worst, you see a steady decline in zoo attendance since 2014. At best, maybe it's stagnant. We have had no major investments in new exhibits that have taken place in that time frame. The staffing model that the zoo is currently under is another challenge that we have. We're top heavy with part-time employees and don't have the ability to fill all of the full-time positions that are currently available at the zoo. This creates obviously instability with management and operations at the zoo, and leads into one of the big challenges that all this comes back to, which is AZA accreditation. Every successful zoo throughout this country, regardless of size, that has any level of success is AZA accredited. I'm sure we could probably find one exception, but everything that this task force looked at found that AZA accreditation is critical. And I was somewhat pleasantly surprised that in polling that we did as part of this task force, also paid for by the Zoo Foundation, that the citizens of Little Rock understand AZA accreditation and understand that that's important to having a solid and quality zoo. This is a list that we don't want to be on. When you talk about zoo accreditation, you see small communities, larger communities, close by communities. I'm not exactly sure where Mill Mountain is, but we're not on this list right now, which is a good thing. And it also shows large cities are having this problem with accreditation and how to properly manage their asset. Small cities are having it. The one thing we do share with this list, unfortunately, is financial uncertainties. We have those at the zoo. Outdated facilities you see in the headline. We have outdated facilities for any of you all who have been to the zoo and seen some of those old buildings that we have. A lot of deferred maintenance. These are the problems that get us into trouble with accreditation. A feasibility study that we did would echo what some of the others before me have said, which is when people look at a city asset and they look at the funding for that asset and raising private funds, they want to see a strong commitment from that city in terms of its citizens. And so when we don't have that, it makes it harder for us to establish a long-term fundraising mechanism and a long-term fundraising base to raise the significant equity that you need to make some of these improvements. We operate annually at about $2 million below what we really should be on operations and maintenance. That gives you an idea of the deferred maintenance cost buildup on an annual basis. And again, it creates more challenges. It's hard to plan when we're just fighting to keep maintenance and keep things safe and make the minimal improvements that we can. That brings us to the task force. So we convened a task force of several people throughout the community, and our job was to look at this issue with the zoo and figure out how we can bring the zoo to its full potential and provide a sustainable business model for the zoo moving forward. And we looked at various models throughout the country, private, public, county, city, private and public partnerships. And here's a list. I won't name all of the great folks that are on this task force, but you can see the names there. And I'd also like to ask at this time, if it's okay, anybody who was on the task force or a member of the Zoo Board of Governors or the Zoo Foundation, if y'all would please stand up. A lot of work went into this and a lot of people participated in this. So thank you all for being here and showing your support and working together with us to solve this problem for the zoo. Did we have any of our kids task force members that were able to make it tonight? I don't think we did. I'll talk about the kids task force in a moment. So here's just, we did a couple of large meetings, but work was taking place throughout the process. This is what I get the most excited about, is the kids task force, that they came together for 2 days, 2 full days out at the zoo, and all huddled up together and figured out what kind of zoo that they wanted to see. And of course, you can imagine there were a lot of Ferris wheels and zip lines and swimming with seals and penguins and petting and petting animals and feeding animals. But the great thing about kids is they're honest. They tell you what's not working. They tell you what they think will work. And they're exactly the type of people, they're exactly the ones that we want to make this exciting for, because they're going to drag their parents to come to the zoo. We conducted online public surveys, 2 of those before and after the task force. We conducted extensive research polling on many issues that we'll talk about in here. We did everything we could to engage the citizens of Little Rock on this issue and get their opinions. The why, what, how. This is really what it boils down to for our task force and what we looked at. Why is this new model important? You've seen some of those reasons why what is currently taking place is not sustainable in the long run. What do we need to get that additional funding that we know will be required for an investment to get the zoo to its full potential? And then how do we ensure that the process we put in place, if that investment is made, is sustainable for the future and is going to be a good investment for all of those that are involved? the why behind this, we've talked a lot about the issues that we have, but it would allow the zoo to fulfill its mission. The zoo is much, much more than just a place to come and take a look at animals, eat a snack, ride a Ferris wheel, ride a merry-go-round. It's more than that. It's conservation, it's engagement. I would venture to guess that the majority of the children that will come to the Little Rock Zoo from Little Rock, that is the only time they will see those animals. They will never get a chance to see many of those animals in the wild, be it for economic reasons or for conservation reasons. So it is a window of the world to the world for our kids here in the city. And it will help ensure accreditation for the zoo, which is important to make sure that we have that so we can keep moving forward. Kids Task Force results, again, this was what I'd mentioned earlier. They met over 2 days and designed their own zoos, but one of the big takeaways was new exhibits. Interactive play with animals was something that kids are really excited about. Ways that they can feel like they're out amongst the animals that they're there to visit, be it through a splash pad next to a penguin exhibit with slides that may go through that pool, making them feel like they could be swimming with the penguins. They want to see animals in their habitats being active and out, not staring at a space in a July afternoon during school break when there are no animals out at 103 degrees. So a master plan that is in place now would help us create some additional opportunities for kids to see the animals that are there, and more conservation education and STEM education is something I'll talk about later as well. There's a way that we can engage every school in Little Rock with the kids and incorporate really a STEM learning laboratory, which would be within the zoo. We did several online polls. Again, here's just some things that you see, folks. This was 6,500 respondents within the city of Little Rock, representing every city ward. These were some of the things that they wanted to see. I have a tendency to believe that with the zip lines, some of the kids got a hold of their parents' computers, and because we heard a lot about zip lines in our Kids Task Force too. But you see some of the restaurants with after hours, overlooking animals, things of that nature. Here's just some visions. These were based off of the 2014 plan that we have in place, a new expanded giraffe habitat. Our director, Susan Altrui, who has worked tirelessly on this task force and deserves a tremendous amount of the credit, she will tell you her number one thing that she hears from people is, where are the giraffes? We need the giraffes back. We don't have the space for giraffes right now. That's why there are no giraffes. This master plan would allow us to bring giraffes back into a more interactive and safe habitat. You would even actually be able to we would incorporate a feeding deck where you could feed giraffes, that interactive nature that I talked about. People want to be able to interact and get close to these animals. A rhino feeding deck. I'm not quite sure how I feel about that rhino feeding deck, but if Susan says we need a rhino feeding deck, I'm all for it. The new bear habitat, there you can see the ability to get much more closer to these animals in ways that they're interacting with the people that are coming to see them. Conservation, as I've mentioned before, that is a huge part of accreditation, a huge part of what the zoo's mission is. Two species that we could be looking at is the razorback hog habitat, red wolf that was native to Arkansas, also happened to be mascots of two of our larger four-year schools. This is an important slide in my opinion, because it shows what the zoo could be with this investment to put in place the master plan. We could see visitation increase to over 500,000 visitors annually, which would be double what it was in the slide that I showed you previously. It would make this one of the largest attractions in the state and the region. It would pull more people to Little Rock from within Arkansas and outside of Arkansas. We would be able to sustain an annual budget of closer to 12 to 13 million, double where we are now, and we would estimate that an economic impact would roughly be about 20 million a year, or 5 years at $100 million. So the potential for bringing an economic impact to the city of Little Rock is great with the zoo. With this new funding model, I I've mentioned many of these things. It would put us on a sound financial basis for the zoo operations. Would create stability. It would be smart development. It would be smart growth. It would incorporate the parks around it and the overall plan with what you all's vision for this city is. And it would create a plethora of educational and cultural opportunities. The funding need is great. Over 10 years, $90 to $100 million. That's what it is. That's what the master plan calls for to put this in place. You see some of the things there with the multi-species African habitat with giraffes, which I showed you a rendition of earlier. There would be that 3 holes on the War Memorial course that would be taken into the zoo with connectivity between that section, the park, and the remainder of the zoo. And also a big part of what the task force discussed was how do we reconnect on the south end of I-630 and bring that part and bring more access back in to the zoo from that way. We need to make improvements on accessing the zoo, just like our previous presenters discussed accessing those parks from multiple points. One recommended solution that we looked at is a city referendum. This would be the citizens of Little Rock would make their decision on the zoo and their support for the zoo. It could generate, depending on the size of that sales tax, 25 to 50 million annually for parks and including zoo. Some of the things that the zoo believes strongly in, if this direction were to be taken, is creating free access to all schools to bring kids to the zoo. That would happen. Public school kids could come to the zoo for free, for quarterly free days for anybody from the city of Little Rock to attend the zoo for free. And this is where, again, we would look at funding and injecting $1 million into partnering with Little Rock schools on STEM learning opportunities that could take place on site at the zoo and really expand access to the types of STEM learning and training that children need to be having to take the jobs that will be here when they are of working age. There is currently $3.2 million annually budgeted and appropriated to the zoo from the city. If a referendum approved a sales tax initiative with a new line of funding, that $3.2 million obviously would be back in the city coffers for other use. It's not necessarily new and it's not necessarily a savings, but just wanted to make sure we pointed that out. These are some of the zoos that have passed bond initiatives or sales taxes in the recent past. St. Louis, Tulsa, Kansas City, Oklahoma City, Tucson, dozens of others that we looked at. There's 3 on that list that we all know a lot of folks from Arkansas attend and visit, and those zoos. They've all seen success. They've all seen increases in attendance with that renewed investment by their communities when they made that investment and created the improvements to make a better zoo. We polled this as part of our task force. Overwhelmingly, the citizens of Little Rock support the zoo and support a new funding source for zoos and parks. We saw that before we asked questions. We saw that after we provided more input on both sides of the issue. It maintained pretty steady. Overwhelmingly, the citizens of Little Rock supported increased funding for the zoo and the parks. A big part of this, and I'll go back to this slide, when you see these cities and the success I talked about after they received funding, every one of the cities on this list that have a zoo, the zoos in these cities, all have a public-private partnership model in terms of managing the city asset. And that is what our task force found would be the most logical and almost required course of action, in at least my opinion, and I think our task force members' opinion as well, to really strongly look at a public-private partnership. And in that situation, the city would still obviously own the asset. The city would still own the zoo, and the city board would still have oversight of that city zoo. But the day-to-day operations and the administration of that zoo and the care of the animals would move to a private entity that is focused on running and maintaining and creating success for the Little Rock Zoo. And we feel like this would be the right move to make. Again, we don't want to recreate the wheel. We looked at what other communities have done, and they have all moved. Memphis, I know, has moved to this as well. So this was something that we felt was a big part of our findings. And to conclude, again, the zoo is a wonderful asset for our community, but it can be more. It can be a lot more if the citizens of Little Rock so chose to support this zoo and provide the funding when this funding would come with parks. We can create a much higher attended, higher revenue entity for the city, and something that we can all be proud of, that will bring people from all over the state and hopefully the region to visit Little Rock. And with that, I would conclude and be happy to take any questions that any of you may have. Yes, ma'am.
Irma, would you punch your button so I can turn you on? Wait a minute. Hold on.
What you
There
just
you
told
go.
us.
You're on
Come
now.
on. Would we get a copy of what you just talked about?
The in terms
Like
of
the gentleman
master
before
plan?
you, will you have a printed
Oh,
information?
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, it's on its way?
We have that. And
Okay.
anything else that I referenced in that, we'll be happy to provide a copy with the, I also referenced the master plan from 2014, any type of questions on.
Go to your mic. Stay to your mic.
My apologies. I would be, there is the presentation that I provided, but anything within that presentation that is referenced, I would also be happy to provide that if you would like that as well.
So am I to understand you are a private concern right now? Is that what you are? Are you employed by the city?
Oh, no, ma'am. I'm an attorney here in Little Rock, and I'm a volunteer on the Zoo Foundation Board and a participant on the task force.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Director Hendricks. Any other questions for Mr. Causey? I want to thank you for your presentation. Thank you for the work that you do in regards to the zoo. And you were talking about Memphis, and I remember when my kids were little, they're grown now, but little tiny girls went to the Memphis Zoo. And there was this big picture window, and the gorilla was like halfway on the inside of his area. And we were the first ones to come to the window, and then he was looking at us, and then people kept coming to the window and kept coming, and there were like 3 or 4 or 5 rows of people looking, at the gorilla. And then all of a sudden he runs and he throws his shoulder into the window. And so everybody there just jumps back. And I think, talking about interactiveness, I think we were his entertainment for the day. It was pretty exciting. The other interesting piece was there was a broken piece of the glass that you could see it from one corner. It was cracked all the way down to the other corner, so you can imagine how that might have happened.
Yes.
Pretty exciting. But I do appreciate the work that the task force has done. I think you've laid out a good program for us. So I do appreciate you. Did the mayor come back? He came and he left.
Okay.
Are you ready to take over, or do you want to? Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Vice Mayor. We have before we get started, thank you guys. We'll let everybody who was here for those presentations to exit if they would like. Thank you again for all your hard work. Also, we see in the audience someone who has not stepped foot in City Hall, in particular, maybe not City Hall, but hasn't stepped foot in the City Board meeting in 3 years, and that is our former City Director, Brad Kazort. If you would, please stand. We want to recognize you for your service. Please approach, yes.
Thank you. It has been 3 years, I realized today, since I've been here, and I want to tell you, I think I enjoy the view from this side a whole lot more than I enjoyed the view from that side. So, and I do want to dispel the rumors that are out there that Director Forts and I are not frequenting 5 a.m. clubs at all. So, but thank you for recognizing me, and happy to be here and supporting the task force that I was happy to serve on for the zoo. So appreciate it.
Appreciate you. We now have, thank you again, Director Kazort. We have one modification for tonight's agenda, a public hearing regarding the establishment of a multi-purpose improvement district. Do you have a motion? There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. M1 has been added. Madam Clerk, if you would, please read the consent agenda.
The consent agenda consists of a resolution to authorize the city manager to enter into an annual purchasing contract with Dana Safety Supply Incorporated as the primary vendor and AVC Incorporated as the secondary vendor in an amount not to exceed $1,211,844.40 for a term through and including December 31st, 2022 for the purchase and installation of vehicle lighting and equipment, and for the purposes, a resolution to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Dell EMC Services in an amount not to exceed $294,479.79 plus applicable taxes and fees for the purchase, installation, and configuration of equipment to provide a backup and recovery system for the City of Little Rock's active data centers, and for the purposes, a resolution to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Peterson Industries in an amount not to exceed $179,491.92 for the purchase of one knuckle boom truck for the Public Works Department Solid Waste Division, and for the purposes, a resolution to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with River City Hydraulics Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $1,917,590.90 for the purchase of 10 Freightliner refuse trucks for the Public Works Department Solid Waste Division, and for the purposes, a resolution to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Adware and Specialty of Texas Incorporated in the total amount of $52,249.24 to provide T-shirts for the participants and volunteers for the 18th annual Little Rock Marathon, and for the purposes, an resolution to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Landscape Structures Incorporated in the total amount of $165,000 to construct and install a new playground at Murray Park, and for the purposes, a resolution to authorize the city manager to execute a construction management services agreement with Baldwin Shell Construction Company for pre-construction services for the Little Rock Police Department headquarters project, and for the purposes, a resolution to authorize the city manager to execute an architectural services agreement with Wittenberg, Deloney, and Davidson Incorporated to provide architectural services for the Little Rock Police Department headquarters project, and for the purposes. That concludes the consent agenda.
There's a motion second. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. We will now go into citizens' communication. We have Mr. Courtney Little for citizens' communication. It's just the citizens' communication portion. You can speak for your. You want to pass? Mr. Little's going to pass. We now have Mr. Daniel Hopwood, and Mr. Daniel Hopwood is. If you would, please come. He went to the restroom. We'll come back. Mr. Henry Droiter, if you would, please approach.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the board. I'm here in support of Ron Muse and his comments.
So you are you're in support of his comments?
In his comments, and defer what time might be allotted to me to him, if that's appropriate.
I have to ask that question of the parliamentarian. I don't think that's appropriate, but let me ask the parliamentarian.
The board made a decision some time ago that multiple speakers could speak, but that they could not speak and give their time to one speaker.
Thank you very much.
But in short, you stand in support of whatever Mr. Muse shares?
Indeed.
Yes, sir.
Thank
you. Mr. Daniel Hopwood.
So I would like to defer my time to Mr. Muse.
I think he just shared that you cannot defer your time, but you can share if you are in support of whatever Mr. Muse
I am in
says.
support, and it also did work for Mr. Onebo at the previous meeting. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Ron Muse, please.
Mr. Nugbo was here at the last Citizens Communication and yielded his time to Carlette Bruce. My name is Ron Muse. I'm a longtime leader in the Forest Hills Neighborhood Association. I am reluctantly forced to respond to Ms. Carlette Bruce's negative comments about me at the last regular meeting in December of last year. She claims I do not love Forest Hills, suggests that I just leave the area. She also implies that a white man should not be president of a neighborhood association because it is predominantly a black neighborhood. There is so much wrong in her statements. Carlette Bruce and her wife just moved into Forest Hills in mid-spring of 2019. Neither has taken any time to get to know me on the substantive level. Yet they want to demonize me. They and Carlette's mother, Tara Bruce, have joined forces with Patrick and Nugbo to involve themselves in subversive behavior that led to what they are now calling an election to try and seize control over the Forest Hills Neighborhood Association. The problem here is it was a phony election. Some have used the term coup to describe it. I learned about a flyer being distributed in the neighborhood for people to come out to the September meeting and meet the new board and officers. Once I learned of this, I asked to meet with Tara to have a discussion. She revealed that there would be an election on secret ballots to elect new officers. I later learned that she had already handpicked her daughter and her partner, family in other words, to be the new officers, and board members were selected in secret meetings to which I was not invited. I admonished Ms. Bruce not to proceed with this sham. Our bylaws provide that the previous president to the current or acting president be included in all board meetings. I reminded Ms. Bruce once again that our bylaws that have been in place for over 30 years and our customary election process has always been an open election. It was good enough for Director Willie Hinton and more in a long list of previous presidents. The bylaws are from a template suggested by the Coalition of Greater Little Rock Neighborhoods. The Forest Hills bylaws spell out that all elections take place once a year in June and the election must be advertised. Tara is only acting in that capacity until the next election in June 2020. Yet she and her gang proceed with the illegal election, which oddly did not include a position for president. Someone asked why there was not a spot on the ballot for president and who decided that, to which Ms. Bruce responded, "I did. I am the president, and it will be for 2 years." She then held up articles of incorporation using Forest Hills in the name and added, "And these will be the new bylaws that we will adhere to from now on." Wow. We asked that her outside key advisors not take sides on this. You know who you are. Objectivity is the expectation of the public from our elected officials and city staff.
Thank you, Mr. Muse. Madam Clerk, would you please read item 9 for the first time? Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Joe Harris. Is there Mr. Joe Harris here? There, Mr. Harris. Sorry about that.
Good evening, Mayor and City Directors. My name is Joe Harris. I'm the CEO of Friendship Education Foundation. I'm here tonight to tell you about Friendship Aspire Public Charter School Middle School's plans to build a new school at Chico and Baseline Roads in southwest Little Rock. The school we intend to build will provide a school building for hundreds of middle school kids displaced when the former Covenant Keeper Charter School closed in February of 2019. I'm also here to request this city land transfer matter be placed on the agenda at the next city directors meeting, at which time we would like to have this body to take a vote to accept Friendship's offer to purchase a 0.2 acre of city-owned parcel of land from the City of Little Rock Land Bank. On December 3rd, 2019, the Land Bank Commission voted to conditionally approve our land transfer offer. Our plan to build a new Friendship Aspire Middle School in southwest Little Rock, primarily for 6th through 8th grade students who were displaced by the closing of Covenant Keepers. The building we have planned for the 15-acre site at Chico and Baseline Roads was leveled in 2011, and to date no one has stepped forward with a viable plan for developing the land until now. Our plan will include the building of a traditional school building, classroom, offices, cafeteria, library, indoor gymnasium, and much-needed community outdoor athletic space. The building will have the capacity for a full rich program offering state-of-the-art, world-class technology-based education, performing and visual arts, and sports and recreational programs. Important to understand is we intend to build a community school. Our school building resources and outdoor soccer, track field, tennis, and volleyball courts will be open for both students and the community to use. We will break ground. Our plan is to break ground on the land in early summer 2020 and open in the school year in fall of 2021. The project team for this project is in place. We're using Ware Architects, Hart Construction, and a national project manager as part of the construction team. We have financing in place to begin and finish the project. Friendship Aspire Public Charter School is part of a national network of charter schools that was founded in 1997 in Washington, D.C. We currently have 3 charter schools here in Arkansas, one elementary school in Pine Bluff, and then both an elementary and middle school here in Little Rock in the former Garland Elementary School building at 3615 West 25th Street. At present, our middle school is housed on the 2nd floor. The students and family of Southwest deserve a new school. We will run out of space by 2021 if we don't purchase and start building now. I ask this body to consider adding us to the agenda at the next meeting.
Thank you so much. Madam Clerk, would you please read, well, actually, I'm sorry, Director Hendricks, you had a question. Director.
The gentleman did say what it is, the reason why he was here, because my question would have been, had he brought this to your attention or to anyone on the board. So I got my answer. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Clerk, would you please read item 9 for the first time?
An ordinance declared impractical and unfeasible to bid to authorize the city manager to extend the contract with the Arkansas Municipal League Municipal Vehicle Program at a total cost of $950,000 to administer a self-insurance program for the city of Little Rock's motor vehicle liability insurance and for the purposes. First reading.
There's a motion second. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Second reading.
An ordinance declared impractical and unfeasible to bid to authorize the city manager to extend the contract with the Arkansas Municipal League Municipal Vehicle Program at a total cost of $950,000 to administer a self-insurance program for the city of Little Rock's motor vehicle liability insurance. Second reading.
There's a motion and second. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Third reading.
An ordinance to declare it impractical and unfeasible to bid to authorize the city manager to extend the contract with the Arkansas Municipal League Municipal Vehicle Program at a total cost of $950,000 to administer a self-insurance program for the city of Little Rock's motor vehicle liability insurance. Third and final reading.
We've now had 3 readings. Are there any questions from the board members? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. We will now move to item number 10. Madam Clerk, before there will be no need to read item number 10, I want to share, after taking some time to listen to many of the constituents and our citizens as it relates to this particular RFP and its impact that it could have on the community. We want to take time to, with also understanding other business issues that are going on as it relates to recycling, as well as we have a contract that is up, I believe, later this year that we have to begin on and look into to turn on the light as it relates to April 1, 2021. We want to take time from a management perspective to get it right as it relates to sustainability. Clearly, sustainability is a positive, but also we have to understand that even with sustainability, it has a cost impact on our citizens, and we want to always be very sensitive to that cost impact on all of our citizens, particularly those that are of a lower income and elderly on fixed income, and we want to figure out what we can do to get it right the first time. And not make any changes going forward until we get it right when we present it to the body for a vote. So as the author of this resolution, I want to ensure and understanding that this was something that the board wanted us to look into. That's the reason why it was presented. And after looking into it, we understand that there's some issues that need to be addressed to get it right the first time and ensure that we are always being sensitive to the cost of our constituents as we move forward. And so I will be pulling this ordinance from consideration for a vote. As the person that want to pull it from consideration for a vote, understanding that the board had wanted us to get through this, but having the authority to pull, I will pull. However, we do understand that Ace Glass, Courtney Little, who is the CEO, has spent a lot of time and effort as it relates to submitting to this bid. We appreciate that time and effort, and we also understand it took some cost. As well, and that doesn't go unnoticed or unappreciated because that's certain business practice we understand happens from time to time, but we do know you did give your best effort, and we want to recognize you for what you're trying to do in the city of Little Rock and moving sustainability forward by providing this type of effort. And with that being said, while I am pulling this bill for consideration for a vote, I did want to give you the opportunity to give a presentation as you have shared, to give that presentation. Also, for the individuals who did sign up to speak, we know you spent a lot of time to be here. We also want to give you the opportunity because you did fill out cards, if you want to still, even if you're against it, you still can speak against it, but we are pulling the bill for no consideration.
Mayor, I'm sorry, but if the item has been pulled from the agenda, then it's not a topic for discussion. It's a part of the agenda.
Can that rule be suspended to allow Mr. Little?
You don't have an item to suspend it on. There is. It's not on the agenda. I'm sorry.
That's news to me. Okay, was not aware of that.
I should have. Wish I had told you earlier. I didn't.
What are you saying, Tom? I don't hear you.
What I'm saying is that when an item is pulled from the agenda, there's no discussion because the item is not on the agenda.
Thank you for the information, Mr. Attorney. The item is pulled from the agenda, and so there won't be any discussion on that. Let me ask you this, because it was the understanding, at least my understanding, and I definitely understand that I was going to give Mr. Little that opportunity to speak. Now that Mr. Attorney shared that he could not, Mr. Little did rightfully sign his name to do citizens communication. Can we give him his 3 minutes that he already signed up for?
The answer to that is essentially no, but that is one that the board could vote to do so.
I think the board would allow that. Is there a motion? All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Mr. Little, you have your 3 minutes.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I wanted to say my name is Courtney Little. I'm with Ace Glass. I'm red in face not because of anything that's happened tonight. I made the mistake of going on a nice sunny ride at lunch to clear my head and got windburn, so I didn't want you to think that I was up here red-faced and had a lot to say. So just want to share with you a little bit. There's been some misinformation about what we've been trying to do. We heard a couple of years ago glass was leaving the stream in Little Rock, and as a citizen of Little Rock, I thought, can somebody solve this? And then realized it was me that had to dig in and do that. So we went through a process of researching this. We've been nationwide. We've got a lot of attention and participation from a lot of people. Found out that the best way to do glass recycling is called multi-stream. It's got to be separate. Otherwise, it takes good cardboard and plastics and paper and aluminum with it. So we've offered to do that. The city, we did a survey of the citizens. We used a reputable and experienced survey company who came back and said 64% of people in Little Rock want it and are willing to pay for it. And we said every ward, every race, creed, color, gender, we didn't want anybody left out because I didn't want to be up here asking you to do something that my fellow Little Rock citizens did not want. We got the RFP, we responded, and we're the only respondent. So citizens consider it essential in Little Rock. We've got 547 people that have already signed up for a curbside solution now. but that was intended to be temporary. We've also provided drop-off centers throughout town that everybody considers free and enjoys. Unfortunately, those were a temporary solution also, and those business owners and myself have been bearing that cost as a temporary measure to keep people engaged with glass recycling. We've had a lot of contamination issues, people walking right up and putting bags and boxes full of stuff, which is the concern with that, and overfilling. I've got pictures and pictures from Edwards of people piling up 15 and 20 feet on a surge weekend. Not a weekend that you go, it's New Year's Eve, of course everybody drank a lot of beer. It's just because it's Friday night. So we've had a lot of issues with that. And the big thing with recycling is convenience. It's got to be easy. All people say, I'll recycle if it's easy. If I've got to drive somewhere, if I've got to load it up, if I've got to carry that, it's like 4 times as many people would do it if it's at their curb. 2 of our main competitors, we've looked at economic development. I obviously own a business in town. I employ north of 170 people across the state. I hire a lot of second chance citizens. We go above and beyond because I care about our city. So 2 of our main competitors in the state, Conway and Fayetteville, have curbside recycling. That's who we're competing with. We've lost a number of great opportunities for Little Rock to other regional, Lexington, Kentucky, other cities have gotten our jobs, our companies, people that would have moved here, moved there because we don't have good recycling in Little Rock. It's being held against us. Our plan was to hire more people and less equipment. We were going to be paying north of, close to $1 million in salaries. I'll wrap up. Basically, our process was to hand collect glass, to do it separately, to do it right, and we've done it at the most cost-effective way we've seen done anywhere nationally, so much that the national packaging and recycling institutions have reached out to us and said, if you can figure this out, your cost is better than we've ever seen. Would you take the show on the road? Little Rock would have been the first. So at some point, I hope you vote on this and do this because I would love to see that positive PR for a city that I grew up in and love. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Little. Director Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Courtney, thank you. I don't have any questions. I just want to thank you for going above and beyond and stepping up, and I would be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed. And I would especially commend you for going back to the drawing board and finding a significant savings with a monthly pickup. And I'm not going to give up, but I appreciate you. Thank you.
Director Richardson.
Mayor, not on this issue, but a point of personal privilege. Tom, since your mic is on, can you give us an update on the apartment complex on Asher where people have been living without heat and gas? I know that we had an email thread going back and forth about a week or so ago before you went out of town, but I'm getting information that those folks are getting evicted or threatened with eviction, and that typically happens when people who live in these types of complexes make complaints about living condition, and those misery merchants take advantage of that, and they threaten them with eviction or actually evict them, which is why we don't hear about these issues so much throughout our whole city. We have a lot of them in Southwest Little Rock where we have apartment complex where the owners are more concerned with keeping those units occupied than they are with the living conditions. And I heard that their attorneys made some blatant misrepresentation in the environmental court. Can you give us an update on where we are with that?
The case was presented in environmental court. The court set another hearing. I think it's the 21st of January. I don't have the date right off the top of my head. And he's going to hold a follow-up hearing. At that time, there was at least a building, if not 2 buildings, that did not have all of the services for gas to heat the water and to heat the apartments. At one point, I understood the apartments were trying to ask the people to leave and they wanted to stay, and that's where it was the last time. I haven't asked anybody. I didn't know it was going to come up tonight.
So they can evict people before this 21st, the hearing of the 21st. There's nothing legally that we can do.
Director Richardson, in general, in Arkansas, if you're a tenant, you have no rights.
I know we have some of the worst tenants' rights, ownership rights in the country, state. Unfortunately, I agree with you on that. I'm sorry that we have that in our state. Just thank you for your answer, sir. I appreciate it.
Director Wright.
Yes, 2 points. Mr. Carpenter, you are talking about Big Country Chateau, right? Okay, that's on Colonel Glenn. I got thrown when you said Asher. Okay. Just keep me posted. Mr. Mayor, I had a question from a neighborhood association regarding a new policy that they were told you implemented regarding individuals requesting dumpsters. They were told that a resident called and said that they had tried to request a dumpster be brought out to their residence, and they were told that they had to go through the neighborhood association in order to request a dumpster.
I'm not familiar.
Can anybody
Mr.
answer?
Honeywell, Mr. Moore, but before, because we still have one more item, and generally we go to these type of things after we got the public hearing. So unless Director Hendricks has something germane to what Mr. Little shared.
Individuals here from south, I call it south of 630, and we were concerned about the glass pickup and all of that, and I want to thank them. This is their second time, so don't give up. The mayor's going to take care.
Thank you, Director Wright. Ms. Hendricks, we'll now.
Come back to my question after.
After we do the
Okay.
hearing, yes. Madam Clerk, would you please, I'm now going to open the hearing for M1. Madam Clerk, would you please read the ordinance for the first time?
An ordinance to establish and lay off City of Little Rock, Arkansas Municipal Property Owners Multipurpose Improvement District number 2020-001, the Park Subdivision, to declare an emergency and for the purposes first reading.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Second reading.
An ordinance to establish and lay off City of Little Rock, Arkansas Municipal Property Owners Multipurpose Improvement District number 2020-001, to declare an emergency, second reading.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Third reading.
An ordinance to establish and lay off City of Little Rock, Arkansas Municipal Property Owners Multipurpose Improvement District number 2020-001, to declare an emergency, third and final reading.
We've now had 3 readings. Are there anybody to speak for or against?
Mayor, Mr. Cumpy asked if I could present this. Something came up very late this afternoon, and he asked if I would do this. Essentially, this is an improvement district to help put into infrastructure improvements for an area that's being developed. They had sufficient signatures. They have appropriately selected their appraiser, and they've got 3 people listed in the ordinance who will serve as commissioners. They've met all the statutory requirements, so the board really doesn't have a lot of options. You have to pass it.
Thank you. Well, we'll get to, we're in the middle of the hearing. Yes, sir. You got to push it. Just use mine.
My button's not working. Mr. Carpenter, what's the location for this multi-purpose improvement district?
I don't have the description right in front of me. I should have pulled it out. I apologize. Here we go. The property is well, I've got the meets and bounds description. It's on Man Road, essentially. So that is the area where it is.
Man?
M-A-N-N Road.
That's why I was asking the question. Who are the commissioners that they have selected?
Rick Ferguson, Randy Ferguson, and I think this is going to be German Jimenez. I don't know if it would be Herman Jimenez. I don't know how you do G's in Spanish.
Okay. I'm aware of the location now. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions for or against, there being none for the passage, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Well, sorry, before we can't do that. We first have to close the hearing. The hearing is now closed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Motion's passed. All those in favor of the emergency clause for M1, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Motion passes for the emergency. This meeting is now, I'm sorry, Director Wright.
Do you have, Mr. Moore, do you have an answer to the question regarding the dumpsters?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Board members, Director Wright, sorry. There has been some confusion as far as going through 301 and requesting the roll-off service that the city does. We have asked that if a neighborhood association is associated with where the residence lives, that we go through the neighborhood association to try to establish where we're providing these roll-offs, to try to make it more of a neighborhood effort for cleanups versus just individuals getting roll-offs at no cost. For those individuals that are not in a neighborhood association, as we've discussed this with 301 and folks involved, we are going to now, when someone calls to request a roll-off, it will be put in a 301 system. It will come to our staff at Solid Waste. They will contact that person that's requested it. And we also have the ability to find it if they're in a neighborhood association or not through our system. We'll work with that individual to figure out how to get them that roll-off. So there's
Well,
been a little.
please be cognizant of the fact that neighborhood associations do not want to take responsibility for a roll-off dumpster at somebody's house that
Certainly.
doesn't attend their meetings. I mean, I wouldn't assume that responsibility.
I understand.
And that's what the concern was expressed to me.
That's what we're working through right now to work out those.
But what they said is true. That is what the person called the president and asked them to request a dumpster for them, and they refused to do it.
What we're trying to do with this method of distributing the roll-offs is to have them be more community used versus just individuals having a roll-off continuously. So we're trying to spread out the use of the roll-offs.
I understand, but just understand that when illegal items are put in there, you all look at somebody to be responsible and you say, okay, this stuff is illegal. We're gonna fine you for that. Why would you assume a neighborhood association would take responsibility for that?
Well, we didn't assume that. So there still is going to be some responsibility with the person that requests it. That
So
as
how
far
you
as
gonna
what
sort
goes
that
in
out?
it. What do you mean?
So if, say, the neighborhood association allows Kathy to put a dumpster somewhere and it get tires and all kind of illegal items in there, who is your staff going to look back to as being responsible for that?
We'll probably go to the individual that went through the neighborhood association to request it in the first place. So that's how it would have to be if that's the scenario.
Well, I'm just telling you, the ones that have contacted me said they're not going to take responsibility for it.
Okay. We'll continue to work on the process.
Okay.
Director Hendricks is next. Director Aycock. Director Hendricks.
This is the same question, John. I received a call from a resident, and the thing that I did, I called Sue, and she immediately took care of it, and that was it. But I want to ask the mayor, either Mr. Moore, could you ask Mr. Moore, is this policy in place where this is a responsibility of the neighborhood association?
Well, here's what when we can get a better answer, we'll come back before the board. Right now, I don't know, and so what we'll do is just take some time to discuss and have a better answer.
It's a coincidence the two of us got this over the weekend, so it really needs to be addressed administratively.
We'll figure this out.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you. Director Aycock.
Are you trying to say that we're going to start charging individuals that wants a dumpster?
We haven't said that, no.
Well, that's kind of what you're inferring, I think.
No, ma'am.
So-
There's never been a
so
fee discussed
can
with an
still-
individual.
Individuals can still get a dumpster
Yes, ma'am.
at no charge.
That's correct, the way it is right now.
Okay. And I would like to know how we're going to advertise the new rules. I understand that someone said that we was not going to send out any type of press release about the one time only per year of on-curb pickup. So when are we going to take all the new things that we put in place on Public Works dealing with sanitation and get it out to the public?
That I can't answer at this point right now.
Mayor, can you answer that? We have lots of new rules pertaining to putting items on the curb, moving your trash cans back in and everything. That was all put together under the new sanitation increase. When are we going to get those items out to the public so that they will know the new rules?
We will figure that out and get a response back to you.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's not wait until they put the one out and the next time they'll go pay for it without telling them in advance, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, this meeting is now adjourned.